You will excuse me, I had a few notes that I wanted to go on record here about Kofi. And I begin by first saying that I met Kofi after he took over office as the Secretary General of the United Nations. I was introduced by a Kenyan friend who was working for him, Salim Loan, who would have been with us here today, but due to other commitment was not able to come here. Salim was a Kenyan who had been exiled during those difficult times of Kenyan political struggle for democracy. And he had actually become stateless because they had withdrawn his citizenship. But after that introduction, we kept now meeting. Anytime I was in New York, I would go and pay a courtesy call to Kofi. And we became, therefore, very close friends. But I want to say Kofi was many things to many people. And last year, during the funeral, a lot was said by different people about Kofi. It was like the elephant. Remember the blind people who went to find out what the elephant was like. Some would to touch the tusk, other one the trunk, other one the back, and all came up with the different impressions of an elephant. That was Kofi. Kofi is widely respected for the peace he helped to broker in Kenya, and there is reasonable expectation that I will dwell on that. But Kenya was simply an extension of his wider belief that the world should not spectate when conflicts are consuming civilians in some part of the universe, and when state has taken sides in such conflicts. Annan's legacy stands out in three areas. One, the international intervention in conflict as contained in his doctrine of responsibility to protect. Two, social and economic well-being, especially of citizens of the poor nations. We see that in his approach to issues of poverty in general and HIV and AIDS in particular. Three, diplomacy in global affairs. Annan believed most of the world's conflict could be prevented or stopped without bombs and guns. The end of the Cold War came with deadly conflicts in places like Sierra Leone, the Democratic Republic of Congo, East Timor, and Bosnia, to mention but a few. It came with warlords like Radovan Karadzic, Ratko Mladic, and Slobodan Milosevic. This is the world Annan inherited. One of Annan's greatest contributions to global agenda was to refine a policy mandating states to step in wherever and whenever human lives are threatened by hate, disease, or poverty. He advocated an end to the old notion that states can do as they please behind the borders because of sovereignty. The idea that sovereignty is not a shield was a critical part of Annan's legacy to the world. We must also remember that Annan had come to office against the background of Rwanda genocide, where the world has stood aside as armed militia butchered hundreds of thousands of civilians in that country. He seemed to be permanently balancing the madness and goodness of humanity. Annan approached global problems from the position that just as there is limitless capacity for evil in human beings, there is also some potential for goodness in everyone, if only we listened to each other enough. As the world geared for invasion of Iraq in 1998, Annan made it clear that he was going to negotiate with Saddam Hussein. He later had the courage to report that he had a good human rapport with Saddam, to the bewilderment of those who saw the options as either arms inspectors, or bombs. Perhaps the world should have approached Iraq differently. In Kenya, we had the fortune to taste Annan's diplomacy firsthand and for at least 2 months in 2008. Annan's intervention gave way to the most comprehensive review of our laws and governance structure ever undertaken in our country. And when Kofi arrived, because first, the coming of Kofi was not just an accident. It was as a result of wider international consultations. Lord Malloch Brown is in the audience here. He addressed us early in the morning. He was one of the people who were involved behind the scenes. First through his then Prime Minister, Gordon Brown. They called me late at night and asked me if we would accept intervention. This followed a contested electoral results. For those who may not be aware, the elections had been held, presidential elections, and the result were being broadcast live by all the national television networks. And I was leading by over 1 million votes, with only a few more stations left to be counted. When all of a sudden they stopped live broadcast and now started saying that I was still leading, but my opponent was fast closing. And all the television networks were stopped from further broadcasting, only the national television. In the end, they announced the results, and the country imploded. And a lot of lives were lost. Hell broke loose. People were being butchered all over the place. The very sad occasion where people had run and took shelter in a church, and women and children, and then they poured petrol into that church and burnt them alive. Over 32 people. Another gentleman who had taken shelter in his house with his family of 11, they're all also torched alive in the house. So the country was actually burning when they intervened. And suggestions were made, first of the former Prime Minister of Sierra Leone, whom we did not accept. Then they mentioned also Cyril Ramaphosa, who was also not acceptable to the other side, that was my friend. Even Kofi was dismissed for being my friend. But upon intervention of Lord Malloch Brown and the Prime Minister, the other side accepted Kofi to come. Also supported by the then Ghanaian President, Mr. John Kufuor. And when Kofi arrived in Kenya, started by visiting the parties to the conflict. He visited the then president, had discussions with him, then came to meet with me and my team. But first he insisted on having a meeting with me alone. Then he told me that, Raila, there's no standard solution to problems. There's no situation that is replicated in the world. So we must get a Kenyan solution. But every conflict has a silver lining. And every conflict is also an opportunity. That was his belief from many years of experience. That a conflict is also an opportunity. And that is how he had approached it. We agreed to set up a team, 4 from my side and 4 from the other side. And he said with this team in a hotel that is called Serena. And the outcome is called the Serena Accord. And here, it started by going back to where the project Kenya started in order to find a solution. What is it that is ailing Kenya? And they went and did a deep examination of our country. In the end, they came up with an accord. But there was a clause which was contentious, which could not be resolved, because they agreed that you are going to have a grand coalition government, power sharing, with the position of a president and a prime minister. The other side did not agree on the role of the prime minister. And after this, one of the members of the team used some very, very unprintable words that completely upset Kofi. So he told them he was terminating the negotiations and going to the principals. So he went and met the then president. He came and met me and said he must meet with both of us together. Otherwise, he was going to quit. We agreed to meet, and the issue was where were we going to have that meeting. In the end, we agreed to meet in the office of the president, not in the State House. That meeting was attended also by the chair of the African Union, who was President Mkapa of Tanzania. No, not Mkapa, President Kikwete. Kofi was leading a team of 3. President Mkapa, former president of Tanzania, and Graça Machel of South Africa. When we met, Graça was not there, but we were 3, Kibaki, Mkapa, Kikwete, Kofi, and myself, 5 in the room. And it was a very heated discussion. In the end, they persuaded Mr. Kibaki to accept the clause which his team had refused to accept. And Kofi was very instrumental in those delicate negotiations. So in the end, we agreed to sign an accord. And we came out, Kibaki refused to meet his team. He said, we have agreed and we are going to sign. In the end, we went out. Kofi made all the arrangements with his team and prepared the final drafts, which we all signed publicly, and we shook hands. So shaking hands is now a very famous thing in Kenya, handshake. Now, fast forward, after this subsequent election, these last elections, we were in a similar situation. The court nullified the presidential results. They were rigged and ordered a repeat of the elections. The country was again on the brink of what had happened the other time. We reached a stage where we took, both of us took oaths, the then president and myself. So we had 2 presidents in the country. And we were almost on the brink again of the precipice. This time we decided to use Kofi's advice the other time. There's no other country like Kenya. And we agreed to meet just the 2 of us. And after very lengthy negotiations, we agreed, private and secret, there were only 2 of us. The president came to that meeting driving himself. I also went to that meeting driving myself. And we met for 13 hours, adjourned, met again, and then we agreed and we prepared a memorandum of understanding and agreed that this is how we want to now solve this matter once and for all. And we've set us a team, it's called Building Bridges Initiative Team, which is going around the country collecting views of Kenyans, how we can improve on the constitution which was prepared under the charge of Kofi Annan. Then, after we agreed on this, we came out and we shook hands This time, just the two of us without Kofi Annan. Thank you very much.